Lagos, 1929. The colonial buildings along Broad Street stood stiff and silent, their whitewashed walls glowing faintly beneath a swollen moon. The Union Jack hung limp in the humid air. Wooden shutters were closed, oil lamps burned low. Even the lagoon seemed to hold its breath. Then, the clock at the cathedral struck midnight. 1, 2, 3. By the 12th chime, something had shifted. A fisherman named Deo was walking past Old Marina, his net slung over his shoulder, the scent of salt and drying fish clinging to his clothes. He had stayed out too long. The tide had been stubborn. His wife would be waiting. That was when he saw it. Lanterns, flickering in a place where no street existed. He stopped. Between two colonial warehouses where there had only ever been cracked stone and shadow-warm golden lights trembled in the darkness. They were not the harsh lamps of the British posts. These lights danced like fireflies trapped in glass. Then came the sound, low talking, not English, old Yoruba, deep, ancient, the kind his grandfather used only when praying to forgotten orishas. And beneath the voices drums, slow, hollow, beating in a rhythm that did not belong to this century. Eo stepped closer. The empty stretch of road was gone. In its place stood a marketplace. Stalls, carved from dark wood, cowries hanging like garlands. Cloth dyed in indigo and deep crimson. The air shimmered with smoke and palm oil. People moved between the stands calmly, bargaining in hushed tones. Vendors dressed in pre-colonial attire stood behind their goods calabashes that glowed faintly. Bottles filled with swirling mist, beads that seemed to pulse like living hearts. This market had not been there hours ago. It should not have been there at all. Eo's breath caught in his throat. A woman at the nearest stall slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were too bright, too knowing. She looked directly at him and whispered, "You were not meant to see us." The drums stopped. Every head turned. He ran. He did not look back. And by morning, the street was empty again. They say the night market appears once every 10 years, but they do not say who it takes. Aduni Adebayo was 23 years old and already tired of being the only woman in the room. The lecture hall at King's College Extension in Lagos smelled of chalk dust and polished wood. Rows of young men in pressed shirts filled the benches, their notebooks open. Their eyes trained on Professor Whitmore as he paced the front of the room. And of course, the professor said, adjusting his spectacles, these so-called native cosmologies were largely myth-making attempts to explain natural phenomena. Charming, perhaps, but hardly philosophy. A few students chuckled. Iduni did not. Her fingers tightened. On her fountain pen, on the page before her was written in careful ink, Yoruba cosmology. Structured metaphysical system. Not superstition, not primitive. Structured, layered, philosophical. She had grown up listening to stories of Orin and I, the spiritual and physical realms of Orin Mila's wisdom. Of Su, the divine messenger. Misunderstood but necessary, these were not childish fables. They were complex systems of ethics, destiny, and cosmic balance, and she intended to prove it. When class ended, Professor Whitmore stopped her near the door. "Miss Adebayo," he said thinly, "you're an intelligent girl. It would be wiser to write on something academically respectable." "My people's beliefs are respectable," she replied. Her voice calm but firm. His smile faltered. Outside, the air was thick with afternoon heat and the distant cry of market traders. The city buzzed with colonial order on the surface, but beneath it, something older still breathed. By the time she reached home, her shoulders had relaxed. "Iduni," a voice shouted. Tun burst from the doorway, barefoot and grinning, a book tucked under his arm. At 12, he carried curiosity like other boys carried slingshots. "Did they argue with you again?" he asked. "They always argue," she said, smiling despite herself. He followed her inside, eyes bright. "Tell me something new about the spirits." She laughed softly. "You love them more than your school lessons." "Will the spirits read it too?" Iduni paused. Strange chill brushed her spine. "I don't know," she said gently, "but maybe they already are." In the heart of Lagos, a university student named Iduni stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound diary tucked away in a campus archive. Its pages, brittle with age, held the words of Olaudah, a freed slave from the 18th century. His elegant script told a haunting tale, not of his journey to freedom, but of something far more sinister, the market of the dead. He wrote of a place where souls were traded, a market that appeared only under the shadow of a new moon. Aduni felt a chill run down her spine. The words felt too real, urgent. She started digging, poring over old newspapers and police reports. A pattern began to emerge. Over the decades, people had vanished without a trace, always during the new moon. The disappearances were scattered and connected, but when Aduni mapped them out, they formed a chilling line, pointing directly towards the old fishing docks by the lagoon. The diary spoke of a specific ritual, a convergence of time and tide. Aduni checked the lunar calendar, her heart pounding. The next new moon was just 2 days away. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, she went to the docks. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. She found an old fisherman mending his nets. When she mentioned the market of the dead, his eyes widened with fear. He spoke in hushed tones of a local legend, the ghost market where the unwary are lured away, never to be seen again. He pointed her towards a street elder, a woman whose age was impossible to guess. The old woman listened silently as Aduni recounted Olaudah's story. With a heavy sigh, she confirmed the legend. It was a curse, she explained. A debt from a forgotten time that still claimed its due. The market preyed on those who were lost or alone. As Aduni left, the elder's final words echoed in her mind. The market doesn't just take people, it chooses them. Aduni looked at Olaudah's diary in her hands. She knew she was standing on the brink of a terrible truth, and the next 2 days would decide everything. She had to find a way to stop it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow for more mysteries. Tun collapsed the following evening. One moment he was laughing, arguing that Su was misunderstood. The next, he swayed where he stood and crumpled to the floor. His fever came with the night. It burned too hot, too sudden. By morning it faded only to return when the sun disappeared. On the second night, he began to whisper in his sleep. Not nonsense, words, old words, ancient Yoruba phrases Aduni recognized from ritual texts. She leaned close to hear him. They're lighting the lanterns, he murmured. They're waiting. Her blood ran cold. What lanterns? She asked softly. His eyes fluttered open, but they did not see her. The ones outside the window. There was nothing outside the window, only darkness. She rushed him to the British hospital. The doctor barely looked at her. Severe infection, he said briskly. We'll administer quinine, but the medicine did nothing. A local herbalist came the next day, his fingers hovering above Tun's skin. This is not sickness, he said quietly. Aduni's stomach tightened. Then what is it? He met her eyes. Something is calling him. Her mind flashed to the diary. They sell cures for what the living cannot heal. The market appeared once every decade. 3 nights. Tun's breathing grew shallower with each sunset. If she missed it, she pushed the thought away. That evening, as the first trace of fever returned to his skin, Aduni stood by the window and stared into the darkness beyond old Lagos. 3 nights. If the market was real, if the cures were real, then she would find it, no matter the cost. Midnight came heavy and wet. Aduni stepped into the streets as the final bell of the Catholic Church rang across Lagos Island, slow, solemn, echoing through stone and silence. The colonial buildings stood in rigid rows behind her, their pillars pale under moonlight, their windows dark as blind eyes. Fog rolled in from the lagoon, thick and low, swallowing the edges of the road. She pulled her shawl tighter. The city felt wrong. No cartwheels. No late-night traders. Even the stray dogs were silent. Then she heard it. Distant talking. Not English. Old Yoruba, deep, layered, spoken in tones she had only seen written in sacred texts. The words rose and fell like prayer. And beneath them a drums, slow, hollow, ancient. Her heartbeat matched their rhythm. The air shifted. A faint scent drifted toward her, burnt palm oil and something older, like earth after rain. She reached Old Marina. The road should have ended in stone and water. Instead, lantern lights flickered ahead, not colonial lamps, round-bellied lanterns. Their flames golden and alive, they hovered where the road dissolved into fog. Iduni stepped forward. The voices grew clearer, bargaining, laughter, the soft scrape of wood against wood. The drums deepened. One more step, the fog parted, and the street opened. Before her stretched a vast marketplace alive, breathing, and possibly real. Mud stalls lined the path, carved wooden pillars etched with symbols she recognized from pre-colonial shrines. Cowrie shells hung like wind chimes. Indigo cloth shimmered in lamplight. It was not Lagos of 1929. It was Lagos before ships, before flags, before chains. She turned. Behind her stood the rigid British warehouses and iron railings of empire. Before her earth, wood spirit, the drums stopped. Silence fell like a curtain. Every face in the marketplace lifted, and not one looked surprised, not one gasped, not one fled. They watched her calmly, as if she had kept them waiting. The market breathed, not with wine but with memory. Iduni stepped forward slowly, her sandals pressing into earth that had not existed moments ago. The air shimmered faintly, as though the world here was thinner. The first stall she passed belonged to a woman stringing beads. But these were no ordinary beads. They glowed softly, each one holding faint images inside. Laughter, faces, sunsets. Memory beads, the woman said gently, for those who wish not to forget. Her fingers trembled, and then Iduni saw it. The woman's edges were blurring, like smoke unraveling, as if the world could no longer hold her shape. At the next stall, a man arranged tiny glass bottles filled with swirling gray mist. Whispers, he said, last words never spoken. His voice faded at the end of the sentence. His outline flickered. Further down, a child no older than Tund held dried leaves carefully inscribed with names. Names, the child said proudly. Before they disappear, the leaves crumbled at their corners. Every vendor was fading, not violently, quietly, like chalk washed by rain. And suddenly Iduni understood. These were not demons, not tricksters, not monsters. They were people, men, women, children, taken during the slave trade, torn from land and lineage, their names never recorded, their bodies never returned, their stories swallowed by ocean and empire, forgotten by history, forgotten by the living. One woman reached for Iduni's hand. Her touch was cool as dawn. We were taken, she said softly. Our names were swallowed. So we remain here, waiting to be remembered. The words broke something inside her. Waiting. Not haunting. Waiting. At the far end of the market stood a taller stall, draped in dark cloth. Behind it stood a masked figure, carved wood covering their face. Before them sat calabashes glowing faintly from within, cures. Impossible cures. As Iduni approached, the figure tilted its head. Adebayo, it said. Her breath caught. You carry that name. She swallowed. Yes. The masked figure's voice lowered. Your ancestors knew me. The lanterns flickered harder. The drums began again, slow, knowing. The masked figure lifted a small calabash. It glowed from within, soft, golden, alive. This will heal him, the figure said. Iduni's hands trembled. You know about my brother. The mask tilted. He sees between worlds. The veil is thin for him. The market is calling. Tund's fevered whisper echoed in her mind. They're lighting the lanterns. He was marked. The vendor continued. Not for death, for crossing. Her heart pounded. Give it to me, she whispered. The figure did not move. There is a price. Of course there was. One of us fades tonight, the vendor said quietly. Their memory nearly gone. Their name almost dust. Iduni saw, in the corner of her eye, a woman flickering, her form unstable, transparent. You will take their place. The words struck like thunder. You will stand here beyond time, sell to the desperate, remain until someone remembers you enough to free you. Her breath grew shallow. And if I refuse, the answer came softly, then the boy will cross before dawn. Her mind fractured into memory, Tund chasing her through rain, laughing. Tund listening wide-eyed to stories of the Rira. Tund asking, will the spirits read your book? She saw his small hand gripping hers when he was afraid of thunder. She saw him burning with fever. You will fade, The vendor whispered, slowly, unless your name is spoken. The calabash pulsed. Brighter. Someone must be forgotten, the masked figure said gently, so another can live. The drums softened, the lanterns dimmed, and in that fragile silence, Aduni finally understood. The market was not a curse, it was a waiting room, a purgatory built from silence. These were souls erased during the slave trade, stolen from their land, stripped of their names, buried without graves. No records marked their births, no stones marked their deaths. History moved forward as if they had never breathed. And so they could not pass on, because no one remembered them. The stalls were not businesses. They were anchors. They sold knowledge, cures, fragments of memory, anything to remain spoken of, anything to delay the slow erasure of their existence. The more the world forgot them, the more they faded, like ink left in the sun. Aduni's chest tightened. Her thesis, her research, if she wrote their stories, if she recorded their names, she would not just save her brother, she could free them all. When the market appears again 10 years later, a child wandered too close to old Marina at midnight. Fog rolled in. Lanterns flickered. The market returned. But something was different. The vendors stood taller, brighter. Their edges firm, no longer dissolving like smoke. And at the far end of the market, one stall was empty. No seller. Only a single book resting beneath a golden lantern. Its cover bore a title, The Names They Tried to Erase, written by Aduni Adebayo. The child reached for it, and for the first time in centuries the market did not feel like mourning. Because someone had remembered.